Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Starfest Presents Natalie Zina Walschots. I'm Michelle Steinhusen. I'm the festival director this year. As a library, we're all about sharing stories and connecting to the community. So we're doing that by sharing our amazing authors and stories from Treaty 6 territory, which is the traditional lands of First Nations and Métis people. This is a virtual event, but we do want it to be an interactive event. There will be an opportunity to get questions answered at the end of the interview. So please put any questions or comments you have in the chat. We're going to collect all of them. Just make sure you change your chat settings to say everyone instead of hosts and panelists, and then we can share those. If you haven't had a chance to purchase Hench, we will put links to Glass Bookshop and Audrey's books in the chat so that you can buy the book. And of course, we have the books at the library, but I do really encourage people to buy the book. It's awesome. So sometimes when you're a festival director, you get to book something because you like it. And this is one of those occasions. I fell in love with this book and I was so excited to introduce Natalie Zina Walschots. She's a writer and a game designer. And for us geeks, we're going to understand absolutely everything in this biography. Her work includes LARP scripts, heavy metal music journalism, video game lore, and weirder things classified as interactive experiences. She is, unfortunately, and she put that unfortunately in brackets, the author of 2 books of poetry, Thumbscrews, which won the Robert Croce Award for Innovative Poetry, and Doom, Love Poems for Supervillains. Natalie sits on the board of Dames Making Games, which is the best name ever, a space for queer and gender marginalized people to create games freely, where she hosts interactive narrative workshop. She plays a lot of D&D. I will try not to be too excited through this whole bio. I apologize. Participates in a lot of Nordic LARPs, watches a lot of horror movies, and reads a lot of speculative fiction. Her novel Hench was a Canada Reads finalist, and it was 1 vote shy of winning our St. Albert Library version of Canada Reads in March. So to handle this interview with Natalie, I have invited Celine Caruso Dixon. Celine is a political science student at the University of Alberta. Her passion for social justice and human rights have led her to be part of many groups on and off campus who are focusing on bettering opportunities for minority communities, most notably becoming the president for the Black Students Association at the University of Alberta and creating an open mic space called Zion that works with minority communities and those in juvenile detention centers. The reason I asked Celine is she defended Hench at our library edition of Canada Reads this March. When I asked her if she wanted to interview Natalie for Starfest, she said, of course, yes, and also that she had reread the book a few times since March. So we know Natalie should be in good hands. I'm going to hand things over, and I would just like to invite you once more, post your questions and comments in the chat and enjoy your evening.
Michelle, thank you for that introduction. That was so intensely flattering and enthusiastic. So thank you so much, and for inviting me here. This is going to be great.
I'm so excited. First of all, low key and fangirling right now.
I promise I'm a giant dork. Like, please no. In case that's not clear.
Love this book. I don't think anyone, like, I tell everyone about it. My spine is cracking by how many times I have read this book already. Absolutely fangirling. When Michelle asked, I squealed, and then I was like, oh, yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for deciding to publish this. Thank you for coming, for saying yes. Like this wouldn't have happened without you here. So thank you. Thank you, Michelle, for that wonderful introduction. Love geeking out. I was right along with you there. We're gonna hop right into this interview. Very, very excited. So we are going to get to know you a little bit more, and then we'll just dive right into the book Hench a little bit more.
Sure.
If you haven't read Hench, there might be some spoilers ahead, pre-warning, but we'll get into it. So first question, have you always wanted to be a writer? And if not, when did you want to become one, and who was your biggest inspiration to write?
I think I've always wanted to be a writer for sure. I think I've always been one. My parents have a lot of like books that I made when I was literally a toddler, when I would like staple folded over construction paper together and like doodle not words in them, like I'm making a book right now. So somewhere in the like structure of my DNA there was definitely something, and writing has always been pretty core to the way that I navigate the world. You know, I've always done a lot of like free writing and journaling, and just I've always found it an easier way for me to kind of communicate and process my feelings in whatever they might happen to be than talking about them. So it's always definitely felt like my primary means of communication, if that makes any sense. When it comes to like what inspired me, I read voraciously when I was a kid and kind of everything, particularly speculative fiction, but really anything that I could get my hands on. I also read a lot of like literary fiction and that kind of like all-consuming obsession with books, and the potential for escapism that they represented had a really, really deep impact on me. And then in my early teens, I discovered fan fiction was a thing that other people did, and because I had been unknowingly writing like terrible self-insertion Phantom of the Opera fan fiction since I was like 9 years old. Like I'm sure half the earth is done. But then I realized, hey, this is something that other people can do, and you can look it up on the internet. And that actually inspired me to write a lot, because before I kind of like figured out how to invent my own stories and do my own world building, I could play with worlds that already existed and kind of pick up characters and narrative elements that were already established. So it was it was a great kind of training wheels experience for me. And I know a lot of it, by the way, is 100% like serious good writing. That's not to say that like I don't want to disparage any fanfic at all. There's definitely been some like 500,000 word slow burn romance stuff that is like, this is as good as any novel I've ever read, so no disparagement. But it was really important for me to do that kind of writing, especially when I was really young, to kind of figure out how stories worked and take them apart and treat them in a much more like granular, almost engineering kind of way. So that definitely had a big impact on me, but it's for sure been something I've always done.
That's super cool. I definitely relate with like the fanfic of Phantom of the Opera. I don't know what it is. Everyone that I've talked to in my department has had it. Like,
I feel like we grew up like kind of people vaguely my age-ish, right? By which I mean like probably within 20 years, like however long the Phantom of the Opera was playing in. I grew up like 4 or 5 hours away from Toronto. So sort of like our big like grade 6, 7, 8 trip was like go to Toronto, spend the night, like go see the Phantom of the Opera. And I feel like that was a pretty like universal experience. And if you were like a girl of a certain age who like liked a certain type of media and probably had already seen Labyrinth and like had some David Bowie exposure by that point, like you were just imprinting like a baby duck on a particular perhaps unfortunate kind of romance that I blame for a lot of the deep tragedies of my life to come in the future. But for sure there was something that happened there where like this like huge sweeping obsession is clearly like the purest essence of romance according to me when I'm 13 or whatever.
yep, no, I definitely understand that, definitely feel that. A lot of people do.
Ruined my life, it's fine.
Yeah. I recently saw a post actually that said something along the lines of, I really just want to like live in the basement of an opera house and torment like the theater and just get away with it all. I don't want to work.
It's like, that sounds great, actually. So as I've gotten older, I realized that like I somehow transformed from wanting to be Christine, that's a very brief window of time, into like, no, I'm fine being the Phantom. Like that, like that's really who I identify with now. It's like I just want to be grumpy in the dark and convince someone to give me a lot of money for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
That was great.
It works out.
That's
It works
fine.
out in your favor.
Don't have to, put makeup on ever again. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a goal at this point. So in your bio at the back of Hench, it states that you watch a lot of horror movies and read a lot of speculative. Since it is October and it is the spooky month, so excited for Halloween. And we'll be talking about books during this interview. What are your top horror movies and top books?
So I hate this question because there is just no way I'm ever going to give the correct answer. I feel like I need to make a chart of like, here is kind of my like the different films and movies and books that have had psychological impact on me for my whole life. And I'm always going to leave something out. I don't know if you like, if you've ever tried to like make somebody a mixtape or like, what are my top like 10 favorite records? Like, I don't know. I have like 500 favorite records. I just super don't know how to answer this question. So I'm going to give you the extremely incomplete answer to this question, which are like 3 horror movies that I super love, that I saw kind of at really important moments, and also whose aesthetics I like am in love with. So I kind of like gave myself a few extra constraints on here. So not exhaustive list, but I think John Carpenter's The Thing is first of all, a perfect film. Like structurally, it is perfect. The writing is incredible. It has some of the best practical effects and creature design that exist. Like, it's incredible. It looks so good. The texture is so good. It's so profoundly scary. And just holds up, like absolutely holds, like looks as good today as it did, the day that it was made. Like, it looks incredible. You could easily substitute Alien for this, by the way, which is another movie with like all of those exact same things. I chose The Thing because like probably my own emotional affection for that movie is a little bit more, but like absolutely they're kind of doing the same thing. They're just like beautifully designed, and somehow ageless. I really love the movie It Follows. It's one of the like scary, like straight up, there's something about the physical horror in that movie. Like, not a ton of bad things happen. Like, I've seen a lot of like slasher films and a lot of like New French Extremity, and like I like body horror as a genre. And for that, it's very tame. There's like a couple kind of grossish things that happen, but there's something so primally scary about like something that just won't stop coming for you that really gets me. And it's, again, like, it's beautifully designed. The aesthetic is so good. All the tiny choices that were made in it are great. And the third is Under the Skin, which is a super weird horror movie starring Scarlett Johansson. Super weird. It was one of the very first movies that my partner and I ever watched together. And Scarlett Johansson is playing an alien in the body of a very attractive woman who is trying to like convince people like men to get in the car with her so she can like do weird alien things to them. And that sounds very basic, but it's like incredibly creepy to watch this like person kind of alternate between being extremely charming, like in a predatory way, but mostly like extremely charming, and then completely inhuman. And it gave me like such a different kind of respect for her acting ability. Like she's really incredible in it. And again, like the aesthetics of that film are incredible, and like the alien moments, there are very carefully chosen, and there are kind of a few images in there that now live rent free in my head, just like permanently occupied. It's like, oh, that's an intrusive thought forever now. Haha, good. I'm glad that's in there. A few moments like that. And I always respect a movie that scars me permanently. Books might be harder. Books might actually be harder. I think that The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson is incredible. I love ghost stories. I love the crap out of ghost stories. If it's a ghost story or someone is like possessed by it, like I will watch the movie 100%. Like it's just, are there ghosts? Do you need a young priest and an old priest? I'm in. Like just automatic, just done. 100% in. And Haunting of Hill House is a great ghost story, and it also has possibly one of the best opening lines in the history of literature. It's perfect, like 10 out of 10, no notes. I really like short stories for horror. I think probably even more than I like novels, because I think that there are for sure like I think like gothic horror, because you need like a lot of space and time to kind of like work through the angst, and there's like a big house you need to explore and everybody's terrible backstory, like you need that kind of room. But a lot of horror is like really great when it's about one idea, one like really bad idea. So I like very short horror because of that, because you can kind of get this like perfect little crystal of a terrible thing. And they're kind of two that that really stick out to me. One is 20th Century Ghosts by Joe Hill. Same guy that wrote Lock and Key and a whole bunch of stuff. And this is his earlier short story collection. And again, like there are a couple in there that are like permanent residents in my head, and for sure each one is, as the structures are so different, and they're really like lovely and perfect. And then there is a collection of I want to say like Eastern European like folk tales, but done as horror by a writer and friend, David Demchuk, called The Bone Mother, that is absolutely terrifying. Like they are so distressing and good, and often about family and physicality, and it's so good and heartbreaking and distressing. But highly recommend. Along the same lines, in the sort of like dark fairy tale vein, the writer and cartoonist Emily Carroll has a collection called Through the Woods that is so disturbing, and again like amazing, but like extremely distressing. Oh, and the last one I wanted to mention was because it's the only book I've ever read where I'm like, I don't know if I can be alone the next day. Like I was reading it and it scared me so bad. I had to keep reading it because the idea of like it being at night, like it was now in the middle of the night. And like, if I stop reading this book, then I'm alone by myself somehow, like not reading this book. And that is somehow worse. And also I think like tomorrow I might have to like just find a person to hang out with all day, because I'm now scared to be inside my own house. And that is House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. It shouldn't be that scary. It has no business being that scary. It's just about a house that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And it is one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced. So that is my too long-winded answer, but I never know what to say about my favorite thing, because the answer is actually like 85 times longer than I ever have space for.
I completely understand that. I have new books on my reading list. That is
excellent. Highly recommend.
Amazing. Okay. I am very, very excited. Oh, so excited. Okay. When you get to like new literature recommendations, I don't know what it is, but like something inside just like crawls with excitement.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're like, oh, I know I'm going to like this. you know, when someone you trust is like, this is for you, makes it's a great feeling.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. Okay, so because there in your book there is good, there is evil, there are superheroes, there are super villains. You got everything in there. Was there some intention to make readers stop and question the concept of good and evil in the real world and what it actually like in their lives?
Absolutely. The choice to make all of the characters complicated and moral, like no one's capital G good, right, in the entire book. Everybody is complicated and has kind of varying degrees of strength and vulnerability, and deals with those things in healthy and unhealthy ways. But everyone is no one's hands are clean, and everybody is sort of doing their best or worst or somewhere in between. And that was a very deliberate choice, a super deliberate choice. In particular, when it comes to Anna's journey, kind of from a person in a bad situation, trying to do what they can to like continue to pay rent and live in, like the terrible earth upon which we find ourselves. Capitalism is bad for almost everybody. Sort of that movement from, or that place from like I'm doing what I have to do to I am, rocketing actively toward a villainous career, and I have ambitions and goals and a specific target that I'm trying to reach. It's not an easy journey, and it's not a straight line, and it's definitely one that requires a lot of moral change and compromise. So I was really hoping kind of one of three things would happen, or I kind of expected one of three things would happen to a reader who kind of like went along with Anna. And one of those was like, I knew some readers would be able to be with her 100% of the time and cheer for her the whole way, even if you're like, oh, I'm kind of uncomfortable about this, but like you understand why she's making all of those decisions, right? Like explaining, showing the context each decision was made in, and explaining and kind of really showing how she got there, like drawing a reader along. I wanted you to get it even if you didn't agree with it. But I did expect a lot of people would like get it and cheer for her even when they were kind of squicked out. And I hoped that would kind of carry them right through the end until they kind of found themselves standing next to her, kind of wondering how they got there, right? Like kind of like, oh, I actually have believed you this whole time, and now am I uncomfortable? Like, what does that mean? The kind of answer to that is your own, but I really wanted my readers to come along on that journey, or to get to a point where they couldn't, right? To sort of like, to still understand why she was making all of the decisions she was making and see where she was coming from, but to kind of reach a point where they're like, I can't go further than this. And I feel like a lot of the like reader reviews that I've read of Hench have kind of reflected this. Like either you're like, you get it all the way to the end, or you sort of hit what your own kind of moral boundary is about something that she's doing, or something that she's causing to happen, or some kind of decision that she's made, and you just can't follow her any farther. And I think that that's also extremely interesting. And I think regardless of where what your experience ends up being and where you land, you're going to learn really important things about your own moral compass. You're going to have to kind of question like why you are agreeing with her and why you're not agreeing with her. Like these are very personal questions that I wanted people to have to answer. Like I wanted people to have to like interrogate themselves, even if it was totally subconsciously, like throughout that process, like, why is this happening? And that was all very, very deliberate. And also, like there just aren't purely good people. There are not. We are all weird and flawed and messed up, and I think we should all try and do our best and try and leave spaces better than we find them. And whether that's the kind of world at large or any kind of community we find ourselves in, but that doesn't mean we aren't messed up and we aren't going to make mistakes and we aren't going to hurt each other. And I think that I think any kind of realism has to portray people as complicated, and not kind of like only one thing or only one note kind of morally. It also has to do with like the superhero thing, right? Like heroes are supposed to be like capital G good. I've said this before, but I kind of think all of comics is just the fairy queen. Like they're just like huge allegories, right? Like the characters are embodiments of ideas, right? You have like the embodiment of vengeance or the embodiment of justice, walking around in a human shape. And a lot of the tension of those stories is like, you know, there's kind of a living ideology, and then there's a human person, and what they need and what they can do don't always match, and there's like a struggle there. But generally speaking, I think a lot of comics are really just kind of like walking, talking ideas interacting with each other. But I really wanted to make everybody human. And it was very important for me to kind of focus on the human aspect of it, and the kind of like ordinary and therefore morally complicated aspect of all of these people, and how, you know, like there really can't be moral absolutes, as in like somebody cannot be purely good and also be human, right? Like it's just those aren't incompatible ideas. So I really wanted to lean into that complicatedness, or that grayscale.
That's super cool. Love that in its entirety. Speaking of characters, one character that I loved, I don't know why I loved this character so much, but I did, was Leviathan. So your main villain in the story, super complex. His villain creation story is super cool. What was the creation process for him? What made you want him as your main villain?
So in a lot of ways, Leviathan is like the idea of the adversary. So I'm a gigantic Paradise nerd lost, Paradise Lost nerd. Wait, did I say that reverse? That's very funny. Huge Paradise Lost nerd. I do have kind of a classical literature background, and this is, you know, kind of one thing that's it's something that's very important for me. I have the Gustave Doré etching of Lucifer Falling as a half sleeve. It's a huge tattoo. It took like 22 hours. Not at once, in several chunks, I promise. And I really wanted to like make a villain that was kind of like Paradise Lost's Satan, like the big adversary, like the kind of big force in the world working against like the other big force in the world, like what, you know. So I really tried to make him the sort of opposite of the very classic Western superhero. You know, like if you picture Superman, like what is the complete opposite of that? Like what is the diametrically opposing force? I also think that like you know, there's I wanted him to have a kind of like uncomfortable physicality, you know, like what is like a person who would give you an arachnid response? Like what is that like, or could potentially give you an arachnid response if that's something that you find distressing, right? Like what is, I wanted to make him both really sympathetic and profoundly other at the same time, without as much as possible kind of falling into like a lot of superheroic tropes, right? Like I didn't want to, like he couldn't be Killer Croc, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't that kind of a thing, or and I did not want him to be the Joker, right? For lots of reasons, you know, but I did kind of model him on Paradise Lost Satan more than anything else, and the kind of like larger, almost biblical concept of the adversary, but as a profoundly sympathetic character, as opposed to a kind of default antagonist, even though he kind of is the idea of the antagonist.
Yeah, super cool. Okay, super cool. I remember reading this book and reading like Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan and just like seeing the
Yeah.
correlation. I was like, what is going on? So fascinating. I loved it. Loved every second.
Great.
I'm going to ask you another favorite question. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
What is your favorite quote, line, chapter, interaction in the book?
oh man, right. I knew this was coming. And yet, so this it makes me laugh every time. So I'm picking this. Like I'm like uh it is very early in the book when the electric eel says, "Call me E, Mr. Eel is my father." I just like it just hits me as so funny every single time. Um, there's also a line later on, and I'm not actually it doesn't count as a spoiler, but like I want it to be experienced. But there's a point where Keller and Anna are having a conversation, and Anna is having some like she's having kind of a dark night of the soul, like, can I go through with this terrible thing? And Keller, who might be like, I have a real soft spot for him. Like I really love him as a character, and he became much more important than I expected him to. Like he just kind of stole a lot of scenes for me, and I love him. And Keller's just like not having any of this like emotional nonsense about whatever. And he's encouraging like her to kind of go for quantum, and has kind of a like the way he describes her kind of terrible position in his life and why Anna shouldn't care about her is just so crass, and like it was kind of based on, it was actually based like somewhat on a typo. Like I wrote it wrong the first time, and then my partner saw it and was like, "Oh, did you mean this?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's horrible. No, I didn't mean that. I meant that." And then I realized I had to have him say the terrible, like much more terrible crass thing, because it was funnier and made me uncomfortable. And I'm like, wow, if this is making me uncomfortable, like it must absolutely go in the book. But Mr. Eel is my father is like will forever be funny to me.
Yeah, no, those are good points. I know exactly like the second one. I know exactly what
Yep.
line. I gasped and then I laughed really hard.
Thank you. I did too, because again, like I didn't write it that way the first time, and then my partner read it back to me and was like, "No, it's like it was no, not at all." And no, we had to make it the worst one. So
Yeah.
yeah, also a special place in my shriveled little heart.
I love it. I love it a lot. What are you hoping people take away from this book, honestly?
I really hope they like it. You know, like it's super basic maybe, but I really just want people to like and enjoy it, like above everything else. I believe profoundly that reading should be a pleasurable experience. And that doesn't mean that material can't be difficult or challenging, like, of course, but it should also be pleasurable, right? Like there should be joy in it, and it should be fun. And I just want people to enjoy the time they spend with it, like that this is like a fun and good experience, and like I'm glad I did it. It made, you know, it was a worthwhile way to spend time, like on a very basic level. That I also like really hope it makes a lot of folks really mad about a lot of things that are very bad in the world, right? Like I for sure hope that it makes people even angrier that, you know, like that a lot of us live in authoritarian police states, and that capitalism is extremely bad, and economic precarity puts people in horrible situations. And like, I hope that in all the fun stuff, there is some like real discomfort with where a lot of the like the real place that the anger in the book comes from.
Completely fair. Love that. Love that a lot. A question I've been dying to ask since I first read the book: was there any type of romantic interest between Anna and Leviathan, or was it all just like in my twisted?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, they're for sure. So like, obviously there's a thing going on there, you know, of one variety or another. You for sure have two characters who are like so absolutely determined to like not to deal with their own feelings that like that makes things pretty complicated. I think like I feel like we kind of divide relationships into like romantic, whatever that means, and everything else. And like romantic means like a very particular kind of one-on-one partnership, and everything else gets to be like really messy and complicated. And I feel like there's just it's a whole spectrum of ways that two people can become attached to each other and really mess each other up, and become kind of deeply emotionally entangled. And you know, I don't think they have like a traditional kind of like fairy tale romantic connection, or but I think that like there's a very deep thing going on there, and it's for sure something that like they are going to continue to have to like figure out and deal with, and figure out how to negotiate as they kind of come into their own power and vulnerability, you know, kind of both, and respectfully. But yeah, there's I'm very comfortable saying there's like a thing going on there. Like what that thing ultimately will or will not blossom into, like who knows. Again, like I have a history in fan fiction, so I'm content to wait and like let them sort it out like as long as they need to, you know. Like I watched all of the X-Files growing up. Like I'm prepared for this to take as long as it's going to take. So
love it. Okay, cool. I remember like reading through it and I was like, is there something here? Is there not something here? And I was like,
yes,
maybe I'm just like twisted and dark and just like.
Nope, no, she thinks the bug is handsome because the bug is handsome. I'm sorry, I made a handsome bug. I've done this terrible thing. But yeah, no, there's definitely a thing going on there, and they're going to have to figure it out eventually, unfortunately for both of them.
Fair enough. No, love it. Amazing. So in your personal opinion, who has the better villains, Marvel or DC?
Oh man, this is hard. I think probably man, I think probably the DC Rogues Gallery is better. But it is a hard one. And I think in more recent years, Marvel's been leaning more into the anti-hero kind of aspect of things, which has traditionally been like more of a like, you know, in kind of the like dark horse DC kind of, you know what I mean? Like there's DC got like down with the grimdark a little bit earlier and kind of like really started to figure out like anti-hero things and villain things like in a different kind of way. Yeah, and I mean, I think the Batman Rogues Gallery is obviously like huge and extensive and complicated, and there's, you know, there's a lot to pick from there. There's kind of a lot of things going on there. But it's like, it's at this point, it's kind of splitting hairs, you know. especially like, you know, we're seeing even things like Loki, right? Where you have, you know, Marvel villains who are emerging as carrying their own stories, right?
Mhm.
Like for sure, you're seeing, and I know that's like MCU like movie TV land, but you know, let's just take everything kind of like as equally as we can. New terrible DC movies kind of hitting pause on, put a pin in that for a second. But I think that like Marvel's doing a better job all the time, so it becomes kind of harder to make those like who's actually handling this better calls. But I think probably from a like historical standpoint, I definitely have the most affection toward DC villains.
I feel that very, very heavily. So within that universe, then, who do you think is one of the best villains for character, for like plots, for character design, all of that
Listen,
stuff?
this might be basic. I'm willing to accept that, but like I love Harley Quinn so much. Like I am a Dr. Harleen Quinzel apologist. I will die on this hill. Like absolutely. First of all, like invented in Batman the Animated Series. Incredible. Like as a she is such a great and powerful character. She managed to like start as a totally like maybe one or two off, you know, like cartoon for children. Like that show is perfect. Like I'm not, no disparagement here at all, but very humble origins and has like by sheer force of personality kind of become the icon that she is today. And I've loved Harley from the moment she appeared in that show until now. And you're doing amazing, sweetie. Like I'm just so happy that she is getting the time and the space that she deserves. So huge I have so much love and infinite patience for, and I will defend her till the end of my days. From people who are like Harley is basic, like absolutely not. She has a PhD. She's an actual doctor. Do you? So.
Yeah. All for that. No, I definitely like that's my mom's favorite villain as well.
I love her. A woman of taste, I see.
Yes. Love that. Okay, one more question before we kind of hop into the audience and kind of go there.
Sure.
Will there be a sequel for Hench? Is there something for audiences to look forward to?
Oh, man, I would love to be able to give you like a hard, concrete answer. But I would love there to be. Like, I want very much to spend more time in this universe. I love these characters. You know, obviously Hench is written to be like it is a complete story arc, right? Like it has a very clear beginning, but there's also a ton of beginning and end rather, but there's a lot of space. And I think that there's a lot more story to explore. There's a lot of narrative potential there. I want to spend more time with these characters very much. So I would love to make that happen. And I sincerely hope that in hopefully not too distant future, I will have like actual news to share. But I promise I also want it to happen, and am actively trying to make it so.
Amazing. Cool. Is there anything else in the works currently, other like beside Hench?
Oh, I have like a weird thing happens at a certain point where like most of your projects become secret projects. It's like I've had to sign a lot of things that say I can't talk about a lot of things. So yes, I wish I could talk about them. I am doing a series, like an interactive experience subscription service called the Boundless Library right now. I'm the narrative designer for that. So you you get a package in the mail every month when you are subscribed, and it has like letters and other documents and weird objects and like handcrafted little weird things. You also get a lot of digital files, so that can be songs, that could be podcasts, that could be like, you know, other articles, things like that. And the stories are sort of 1 to 6 months long, and you experience them in this kind of like fragmented experiential sort of way. So like instead of you know, getting Dracula as a novel, you got it as like the box with all of Jonathan Harker's letters and like some of his diaries and a bunch of equipment and like some like old leather gloves that still have like some scent clinging to them, and like a, you know, box of cedar shavings and like a bunch of garlic in the corner, right? Like it's that kind of a thing. It's like a deconstructed story. They're very fun and cool. So that is the Boundless Library. That's a thing I am doing right now. It is very fun, and a lot of other secret projects that I hope to be able to legally talk about in public at some point.
Amazing. That sounds super, super cool. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Very excited for what the future holds then.
Me too.
Sounds super cool. I will let Michelle take over for audience questions.
Absolutely.
So let's dive into it, I guess.
I'm here.
Yeah, and thank you so much for your amazing questions. It's been super fun and deeply appreciated.
Oh, thank you for
your enthusiasm fuels me. This is how I stay alive. I draw my nutrients from other people's enthusiasm.
I love it. Well, thank you for answering them, honestly. Like,
well, obviously
there were definitely some questions that I was like, I have to throw this in here because I need to know. But I really appreciate it, and I absolutely love your work.
Thank you.
Definitely recommended this book many times to a lot of different people. My partner is currently reading it. He's very, very excited. So
that's great. Cool. Thank you so much.
Very cool. And actually, if you I'm sure you know, tons of free time on your hands. But if you wanted to peek, we have our Library Canada Reads is on our library YouTube page, so you can.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we'll absolutely check that out.
Defense of your book. Yeah.
I will absolutely check that out for sure.
If the two of you were sitting in here while you were talking, you would have heard me yelling, "Me too, yes," for like all of these questions. Anyways, I'm actually going to start with writing questions. So from Vicky. Vicky says, you say you unfortunately have poetry collections in your published works. How would you say what you exercised and learned writing poetry brought you to what you're creating and writing today?
That's a great question. First of all, thank you. Secondly, I think it's, I've always been fascinated by like the texture of words, you know, just sort of like as sonic objects, like what are the literal sounds that words make? What are their shapes? I also find vocabularies like really interesting and really, really beautiful. And I became fairly obsessed with the vocabulary around superheroes and supervillains, right? Like there's just so many like super dense, interesting, weird words that go, whether it's, you know, describing powers, whether it's, you know, kind of the internal lexicon that emerges in a particular superheroic universe. It's got some of the best onomatopoeia of anything in the world. Like every single like biff and pow bubble is like, that is an art, 100%. So I would say that first of all, my poetry for sure, my relationship with language is in prose is profoundly informed by that. You know, that I am considering my words carefully, and I'm trying to choose them both because like, hey, this was a fun and good sentence to read, like this is readable, but also like these words are beautiful, and putting them together like is something I find pleasurable and I think is really lovely. So I guess sort of like really focusing on the importance of individual word choice, like even in prose, is probably the biggest thing that I imported. Yeah, and just like language is super weird and constantly growing and evolving, and the bigger your, not just bigger, but like the more time and depth you spend with a vocabulary or a lexicon, like the more deeply you know a subject, the better the words get, right? The kind of like deeper you dig into something. So that's kind of all there for sure.
Are your poetry books accessible to the public? Like, were they
Oh,
published?
they were, yeah, they were published. The Thumb Screws, they're, you know, relatively small Canadian presses. So
Mhm.
like accessible is, you know,
Is how-
interesting,
Yeah.
right? Invisible Publishing now has the original press that published Thumb Screws folded. Invisible Publishing now has the rights to it, and we have been talking about a second print run for it, just to kind of like have it exist in the world again, kind of beyond that first initial run. It is for sure harder to get. Insomniac Books has Doom Love Poems for Supervillains. Obviously, this is a subject I've had some feelings about for some time, and it is definitely more accessible. Like it is still like a book you can just buy, for sure. And I think it's sort of been like not reprinted, but it is at least like actively in circulation. So is easier to get. Thumbscrews is a bit trickier, but. Yeah, I will have to look into, especially with Thumb Screws, if how available it is digitally, because it may now be easier to go about it that way. But I will check.
Very cool. Eva was wondering, as a video game designer, are you a programmer or do you work with one?
Oh, I'm not a programmer, for sure. I have made my own games, like start to finish myself, using programs like Twine, which is not coding. It is like, it involves code, but I am not starting from scratch at all. Like I use engines to do a lot of it for me. So yeah, I would never call myself a programmer or you know, somebody who codes. I am able to use specific types of software with which I can make like text-based games entirely by myself. Usually my work has been with small studios. So, you know, I'm working on a game right now with Peculiar Path. We're currently a team of 4, hoping to expand that to somewhere between 6 and 10 in the next little while. I worked at Stitch Media, which is another developer that has a staff of about 12. I've also done a lot of collaborative projects with you know, with friends and colleagues of mine. So Max Lander is a game designer and programmer. He does a lot of VR development. I've worked on some stuff with him. So I do often work, probably most of the time, work with other people who handle other aspects of it.
Right.
But I've also made my own games start to finish, just, you know, not terribly complex ones.
Can you just talk real quickly about what's Dames Making Games all about?
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. So the name is kind of changing to just the acronym DMG. That's a very recent change, specifically because the more kind of, as the organization has grown, it's become clear we don't want to alienate anybody who doesn't identify as a dame or a woman, or, you know, that we need to be a little bit more flexible than that, or that kind of rigid definition right in the name no longer suits who we are. So we're kind of switching to DMG, or damage, which I like
Nice.
very much.
That's
But it's a not-for-profit organization based here in Toronto. We have an extremely active and passionate board of directors. And as an organization, like when I joined it, primarily what DMG did was host events, like organize and host events, everything from like social gatherings to like a 6-week intensive long program for artists who'd never made a game before, to, you know, like regular workshops. Lots and lots of different ways, basically like giving more people the resources and support to make more games, whether that is space, whether that is equipment, whether that's kind of matching people up with mentors or colleagues, or like, hey, you're a sound designer, you make pixel art, obviously you need to talk to each other because you're both interested in the same kind of thing. Giving people spaces to present their games, whether that be at like a we did a small expo multiple times a year, like all kinds of stuff. Since COVID has happened, it's been a very different situation. You know, we sort of worked in a couple of spaces in Toronto. We currently do not have a physical location because we have had, but all our events have instead been digital. So we continue to kind of, we've now moved to a very active Discord server. I run me and like and one of my one other board member runs the all the interactive writing events and workshops. So once a month there's like a working group, and once a month there's like a discussion group that now happen digitally. There's still the monthly socials, they just take place over Discord. We occasionally host socials in spreadsheets. So this is, so it's like the Excel social where everybody's just hanging out in a spreadsheet making stuff. Maybe that you're the sort of person that sounds like fun to. I am, but perhaps not everyone. But so we're constantly trying to figure out like how can we continue to best serve our community now that everything is profoundly different. Usually, in the past, that's been a lot of physical space and physical gathering space, and education and outreach. And we're trying to figure out how to do the social and the education and the outreach and the support, but online, kind of exclusively, until it is much safer to become like a physical space again. So that is us. I got involved after I took the long program. I did the 6-week game design course, and it was awesome. And I made a terrible game, but it was the first one I had ever made, and I was very proud of it. And they have never managed to get rid of me. So
nice. Louisa wants to know how you celebrate Halloween.
Oh man.
Maybe like pre-COVID. Let's go with
pre-COVID. So usually my partner and I have hosted a pretty big party. He's always been someone who like has the orphan Christmas at his place. It's like, do you not want to talk to your terrible parents? Good news, we have a ham. So we've always sort of been, we've tried to do that for our community as much as possible. And we've definitely like, he is a goth, I am a metalhead, so Halloween is like a big deal around here. We get very into decorations. We have too much candy in the house, so like, you know, the classics, but like typically we have had a lot of people over, watched black and white horror movies, hung out. I usually make like a charcuterie skull, and like we do have you know, ridiculous, horrifying looking but delicious snacks. This year we are having last year we didn't do anything sad forever other than like leave candy out like for the, you know, for the children, and then take it in before the raccoons could get it, because there are more raccoons than people in Toronto. I don't know if you knew that, but
I did not know that.
They have no fear. Total digression, but like on more than one occasion my groceries have been delivered, and in the amount of time it has taken me to walk downstairs, a raccoon is like carrying my bread away. Like, it's unreal. They fear no man. It is incredible. There's so many, and they're everywhere. Anywho, this year, I think we're for actually for the Day of the Dead, we're going to have a couple people over to do a kind of like a much quieter, like this has been a really intense couple of years, kind of, you know, with the rest of our pod. So the 6 people on the earth or like 6 people in total. So the 4 other people on the earth that we've actually spent a decent amount of FaceTime with, but that will be fun. And probably again, a lot of black and white horror movies.
I had a question and I'm trying to frame it in a way that there's not going to be spoilers for people who haven't read the book, but for one of the characters, that's essentially initially like a hero. There's an extremely violent and horrifying, when you talk about body horror, horrifying act at the end of the book that I think nothing in the book leading up to that point is at that level of violence. Did you always have that planned for that character, or as you were writing, did it go like, oh, this person's going down this way?
This is how this is going to go.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know it was going to be that bad. Writing is often an act of discovery for me. It's like, what's going to happen? Mysteries. Let's find out together. By which I mean by myself. I'm not very good at plotting things out in advance. It's much more of a like excavation process. I knew very early that the character you speak of was going to be integral to the defeat of the hero. Let's put it that way. Like I knew that if they were beatable, and I didn't know if they were, that this is part of how it would go down. But that scene is in a lot of ways the answer that I came up with to the problem of like, what do you do with an invincible body, right? If you have a universe where there is no kryptonite. So I said this before, but I really hate kryptonite as a device. It's just a deus ex machina, right? Which like sometimes you need one, like I get it. And if you've created an invulnerable character, the only way there can ever be conflict is if you introduce some kind of magic bullet, right? There has to be, you know, whether it's a literal magic bullet or a space rock or whatever. You need something to introduce real tension and real conflict. And for a lot of the book, they're for that character, the hero, they're kind of like, there are stakes, but ultimately there aren't, you know, that they're kind of the stakes are like internal, but they're to a certain extent untouchable. So I really again, without giving too much away, the only way you can cut a diamond is with another diamond. So the only way you can damage an invulnerable body, theoretically, is with itself. So how does that work? How do you do that? Like if you can't, you know, cut, explode, set on fire, like if, you know, if you cannot destroy something, what are your options? And unfortunately,
that was hardcore. I loved it, but I was like, oh, anyways, if you haven't read the book, and my
content warning, I suppose, that like it does go to a place.
It goes, yeah, it does.
There's not a ton of violence in the book, but I really wanted to make the violence like awful when it happened, right? Like I think that in a lot of superhero media, like people are kind of made of rubber, and like you get dropped off roof and then you're fine. Maybe your arm's in a sling for a couple of scenes, but like generally speaking, like the consequences of violence are either like we don't super see them or they're very superficial. It's all about like the fight and looking cool, but I wanted both the moments of violence to be really relatively brief, right? Really horrible, and to spend much more time with the consequences, because that's kind of the opposite of what we see portrayed in a lot of superhero media.
All right. Okay, final question of the evening. Again, It's my question. Would you like to see Hench on the big screen?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That would be amazing. I mean, like, if Netflix, if you're watching, to please drive that dump truck full of money up to my house is like anytime. Like I am prepared to sign that document. That said, I actually think that like I'd like to see it on TV. Like I think that would be rad. You know, so like less confined to like a feature film and more like Evil the Office, you know, like I think there's like it would be cool, right? Like that would be very, very cool. Obviously like I think a lot of people would love to see anything they make kind of reinterpreted in that way, but my body is definitely ready for the streaming service sellout future. Like I let me retire.
You know, when you're talking about the evil office, my favorite scene in the book that I still giggle about is the temps all meeting for breakfast. And then is it Greg? I haven't read this since the beginning of the year. He has to go out and give tech support to a
Oh
village.
my God. Yeah. Poor Greg.
Turning it off and on again. And
that
like
poor baby.
working in a library, it's not quite as bad, but that made me laugh so hard that even
it comes from a real place, I promise you. When I was a teenager, my future ex-husband did tech support, did night tech support for a small IT.
So did my ex-husband.
Oh, hey, look at that. Don't date engineers, kids.
Yeah.
Goes badly for everyone. Especially if you're someone like me. Poor choices all around. But he would like he did night support, and the calls I overheard were just spectacular, and somewhere I just like accrued like a lot of that, and you know, doing like parent tech support for our lives as we all have, you know what I mean, like you just kind of amass this, you know, this little tumor of of amazing, hilarious, awful tech support moments that I inflicted on poor Greg. Who's
so good. He was so good.
I love him.
Celine, do you want to pop back on and ask your very last question, and then we'll wrap it up? As much as I'd love to sit online and geek out all night. But...
Sure. A note on that last comment. I am laughing very, very hard because my partner currently is an engineer.
I'm sure they're lovely and that it will be fine.
We'll see at this point. Your movie, who do you want playing your characters?
Oh my God. So in my head, they're people, right? Like they're fully realized humans. So it's very hard for me to like imagine them as anyone else, and I realize that's a cop out, but I'm sticking to it anyway. The only exception to that, and this is not it's like not this but like this kind of casting, is okay, so Farscape, one of the best shows ever created in the history of time. I think we all, being people of taste, can agree to this. Has one of my favorite villains ever, and that is Scorpius. Like incredible character design, just like super, super interesting character. And Wayne Pygram, the actor, does a really amazing job. And part of what he does is he talks very weird as this character. He said he took all the punctuation out of all of his lines and read them like with just added pauses when he felt like there would be one, and it makes this super alien cadence, and he speaks very gently. At the same time, he's this like horrifying visage, right? Like you know, there's a lot of like black latex and leather, like very reptilian looking thing going on. Amazing character. And like, I don't necessarily think like Wayne Pygram is the actor, but there's like something about that, like both gentle and alien thing that makes him so threatening. And I've always really, really loved it. And so whoever plays Leviathan would have to like, there's not exactly that, but like adjacent. I'll say that.
Okay,
So
I'm gonna.
casting is hard.
Yeah.
I will
I'm-
hire a casting director, or not. I guess someone will, not me personally, but that will be someone's job.
I guess I better wrap this up. And I'll wrap it up with thank yous. Thank you, Natalie, for saying yes. Thank you.
Oh my God, thank you for
Celine.
having me.
Yeah, thank you, Celine, for letting us drag you back into our library madness. Thank you, Louisa. She was behind the scenes, keeping an eye on all the chats. Thank you to everybody who stuck around and listened to us carry on a little bit. I'd like to thank our funders. Our main funder is the City of St. Albert. We also are funded by the Friends of the St. Albert Library, Alberta Foundation for the Arts, Canada Council for the Arts, and our media sponsors are St. Albert Gazette, T8N Magazine, and Edify Magazine. Everyone has a chance to win a copy of Hench along with all the other Starfest books by filling in a feedback survey that will come at the very end of the festival. We really want your feedback. We want to know what you thought of the events. We also want to know who you want to see next year. Otherwise, I'm just going to pick who I like again, which seemed to have worked out so far. Our next Starfest event is on Friday night. It's Will Ferguson. He's returning to Starfest. He's in conversation with Marty Chan. And then on Saturday, we are having Monsters at the Movies. So Susie Maloney and Eva Colmers will talk about taking horror off the page into a screenplay and onto the screen. We're going to watch a short horror film and talk about that. So
that sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'll send you. You know what? I'll send you the link. You can
yes, I would love that. Please do.
Yeah. So yeah, this is great. Thank you very much. I'm going to say good night, and we'll see you for the next book.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was
no
a blast.
pressure.
Yeah, I'm working on it. I promise.
Okay. All right. Good night, everybody. Good night, Celine.
Good night.